Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
We are going to talk a little bit today about a topic that's not so halachic. It's much more kind of just social and a little bit more general to really the theme of the entire series, but also the reason that Rabbi Pernick and I taught this class together, because so much of the experience of teaching this class with someone from a different denomination, someone of a different gender, someone from a different background growing up in Judaism to where we are today is a lot about what we're going to be diving into based on the episode this evening. So I'll let Rabbi Goldstein in a second talk as much as he would like, but I'll just introduce that the topic that we're going to discuss today is really this idea of how someone in the frum world talks about being secular and someone in the secular world might perceive or talk about someone in the frum world. We definitely see it a lot in pop culture, right? The fact that some of us today in this class, for example, are watching a TV show of people who don't practice like us at all, or anywhere even near how we practice. That's one form of this conversation. And another form of that conversation is reading books about people who have left the Haredi world, or watching shows like Unorthodox and wondering, how does this play out for somebody who's interested in that world of Judaism, and does everybody feel that way? Why do people leave? And it is, Rabbi Pernick and I actually talk about this quite a bit, because he and I, when I will talk about finding interest in those things, he'll probably rightfully so critique the fact that if I'm interested in that, it's more like fetish isn't really the right word, but like an excitement around a life that I will never understand, and the intricacies of what you get to see when you watch a show or read a book from one person's point of view. And what I would say to that is, you're right, it's never a world that I'll understand. It's also never a world that I'll be able to ask questions about. I don't get to daven in a Haredi shul because I'm not a man. So even though Rabbi Pernick, or Rabbi Goldstein in this case, could go into a Haredi shul, even if that's not their way of life, they could walk into a Haredi shul and no one would ask any questions. I can't do that. So any type of culture that I want to see from that world, a lot of it comes from books or from TV shows in more recent years about those topics. So that's something that we're going to speak about today, specifically based on the experience that Hodaya?
Oh, it was Hodaya, yeah.
I'm not getting my character straight, has while she's teaching, and the girls are asking her about being secular and why is she secular and where are her tattoos and all those kinds of things. Rabbi Goldstein, did you want to say anything before we open it up?
Yeah, it's going through. First of all, I just say that because from my own experiences, like I grew up very, very far from the Haredi world. I didn't grow up modern Orthodox, but I've been, I guess, modern Orthodox, if I should be labeled that, for many, many, many years now, for decades. But I grew up in a neighborhood. There were a lot of modern Orthodox Jews, but no Haredi Jews. I mean, some people, they wear a shtick, they wear a black hat to shul, but like, it was less than, maybe it wasn't so shtick, but they weren't Haredi, but they were like professional lawyers and doctors. But on Shabbat, they wanted to wear a certain thing. And when I was in Israel for a number of years in yeshiva, I studied in like a Dati Leumi yeshiva, which is close to like a modern Orthodox yeshiva. So didn't have really any contact with Haredim. But what I did have is the Dati Leumi take on the Haredi world, and it wasn't so positive. So, because the Dati Leumi, there's Zionism is incredibly important. It's also incredibly important to me, but it's also for them, it's an important religious value. Working and building the state of Israel and being a part of the economy and the culture of Israel is also an important value. And of course, we're painting, groups with, I just want to name that we're painting groups with broad brushes. And I think that's like the only way to have this type of conversation. But just want to point out that anytime we mention a whole group like modern Orthodox or religious Zionists or ultra-Orthodox Haredi, there are so many nuances and exceptions and different groups within those broad groups. Just want to point that out there. But there's so in the Dati Leumi religious Zionist world, they don't hold Haredim into such high respects. So I came out of that wonderful experiences learning in a religious Zionist yeshiva, not having such a good attitude toward Haredim. And then I never really met them. No, we would drive through Mea Sharim, and there'd be the settlement next to us, which is full of Haredim. The ones and the rabbis always make jokes about Haredim don't work, or maybe. And then when I got to actually my yeshiva in America, Ovei Torah, which was much more left wing than the Dati Leumi yeshiva I was in Israel, through different reasons, I got connected with a Belz Dayan. A Dayan is a rabbinic judge from the Hasidic sect in Belz who lives in Borough Park. Grew up in the entire sect. First language was Yiddish. Second language is Hebrew. Third language is English that I learned at 18. And he's still in that sect. There's a teacher of Hovevei, very famously, Rabbi Katz, who left the Hasidic world many years ago. But this other person I'm talking about is very much still in the sect. He has a synagogue in Borough Park, very much within that world. And I spent a lot of time talking to him. I spent a Shabbat with him and his family. And it just opened up to the beauties of that world, which was not quite what I was expecting. Also, the law of very difficulties in the world, very strict gender roles. So just from my own perspective, it's interesting because I only knew about the Haredi world based on kind of what I was told and what I read. And then I had the opportunity to go into the Haredi world. I wouldn't say no one asked any questions.
That's fair.
But I could still daven with them and be at their table. And I got had a different understanding of that world and appreciated it in a more nuanced way. Certain things I didn't know and didn't appreciate, which I appreciated more, and other things was I got to know and saw that sometimes the stereotypes are right. So that's where I am now.
I will share a story that because you weren't in our Lafayette, you weren't part of this group when this happened, but I think I've shared this story before to this class, but many episodes ago, we were talking about Minyanim. We were walking through the streets of Jerusalem with our group, and it was a random evening that we had off. And there are Minyanim that kind of start every 20 minutes all around Jerusalem, and people get pulled into those different Minyanim. And I was walking with kind of my closest group of friends from this fellowship who happened to be male and happened to also be modern Orthodox, though no one would have known that. And some guy walks out of what looks like a hole in the wall and says, "Can you help us make a minyan?" And I said very loudly, "Oh, me?" Obviously, they were not talking to me. And this group of guys just went inside and davened and left me on the street to wait for them to be done davening because I had no place to go in. And I there were no bad feelings about that experience, but it just shows kind of the access point that sometimes women don't have into specifically those kind of niche experiences in more Orthodox sects of Judaism. So when Rabbi Pernick is back, you can ask him how that minyan was. I have no idea. Anybody have any thoughts on this topic or based on the episode, want to bring anything up having to do with this particular moment in the episode? Yeah, Denise, go ahead.
So I consistently get the feeling that Hodaya is kind of torn and that there's a part of her that's still very drawn and connected to the Haredi world. Uh-huh. I feel like she has kind of a very deep faith, even way back in the beginning when her niece came and she went to the kotel and all that. And it kind of tugged on her heart, but that wouldn't have happened if she didn't feel it, you know? I think her struggle is a lot more with the culture and with the people and the rules and all that than with like the religious and the faith and with God. And I feel like in reality, those are very much two separate things that get conflated together, but they're really two threads, not just for Hodaya, I think for all of us. And I think that even when people have really strong feelings about movements and shuls and all that kind of stuff, I find that it's a lot more about the people and the vibe than it is about God. So that's just my observation.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I'll let Rabbi Goldstein chime in, but it's a very interesting point and one that I think plays out in many of these different characters, right? What does it mean for them to be part of their Judaism based on the experience that they're having, whether it's with their friends or for Nati around his mom dying, right? Around situational moments as well. Rabbi Goldstein hasn't actually seen the entire series. He just watched this episode to be at this class, so I'm ruining a bunch of things for him. It's okay. It'll be fine. He's fine. He's fine. You'll be okay. But yeah, I think that so much of the Judaism, right? And I put it in quotes because I don't mean the rituals or the halakha or anything around their actual practice, but their religion to them is so much around where they are or what they're experiencing. Did you want to say something, Rabbi Goldstein?
Yeah, and so I just my background for Srugim. I've seen the first season years ago, and then prepare for this, I watched the third season. I was like, oh my gosh, Yifat and
Amir, you're doing great.
Yeah. Are married, they're pregnant, and like the last I knew that Yifat and had a crush on Nati. Okay, so I was like,
yeah, you're behind. You're like behind and on time all of the same.
Yeah,
in the moment.
But yeah, so I do want to point out Hodaya's character, if I recall from season 1, that she didn't come from the Haredi world, but she came from the Dati Lumi world, the religious Zionist world, which it's interesting. She didn't really leave it though. I feel she didn't leave it socially, but she left the ritual part. Look who her friends still are, and at least in season 1, I don't know if she does it in season 3. She still went to Shabbat meals with them. Okay, she didn't keep halakha. She didn't keep Shabbat. She considers herself not religious anymore, but socially, she's still with her same friends, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. And Hodaya pointed out, and the show was pointing out, that the speaker that they brought to essentially to scare the girls into staying religious, just told them how terrible it was to be, terrible her experiences she had being secular. All the parties she went to, the possible dangers that could have happened. And Hodaya was like, okay, but what about all the wonderful things about being Jewish? So in Hodaya's character, I absolutely agree with you that Denise. So there's still like a draw to maybe like the essence, the spirituality of being Jewish, and for whatever reason, she's at this point has kind of dropped the halachic, the strict ritual aspects. But someone who did that. But socially, Rabbi Schatz did it. But socially, she's still very much in the like modern or like a religious Zionist crowd. So interesting. Socially, she's still there. Personally, she's not, but she clearly has a yearning for Judaism and spirituality.
Yeah. I also think what we see in the high school specifically, and this would be a place where I'm sure people will have opinions, so feel free to share them, that there clearly is a reason that this person was brought in, and that was to make sure that the girls who are in this school feel as though there's a reason to remain dati, right? There's a reason to remain within the confines of a religious society, because they're about to be kind of a little bit more out in the world and beyond those boundaries. And so here's a person coming in and saying, I was so lost. I didn't know who I was. I just went to sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And all of a sudden I found religion. And now I don't think that's a bad story. I think a lot of people have kind of that crazy side of them and end up finding religion somehow. But as Hodaya points out, even in front of the whole school, that's not a reason, that's not the only reason to remain religious, right? There are plenty of people who are religious and still enjoy sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? Those are still things that are present, even if you are in that kind of society. So I think that the tension here is what was the reason, what was kind of the hidden agenda behind having this woman come in, and what story did she have to tell to these students, as opposed to then when Hodaya was in front of her classroom telling them, yeah, I worked at a bar. I've never done drugs a day in my life. And yet I decided that I wanted to be secular. And sure, I have a teeny tiny tattoo, but it's nothing crazy that you might be expecting, right? So all of those kind of myths went away. Any other thoughts or questions? You can also bring something else up in the episode if you want. I know that Rabbi Pernick usually opens with that and I have to reel him in. So if anybody has any. Yeah, Michael.
You want to comment on Yifat's behavior? She was a little, shall we say, conniving this week on multiple grounds.
I thought someone was going to bring that up. I don't actually think she was conniving. I think that's how the business world works. I mean, when you're looking for a job, or when you know that you have to get paid more money, you look elsewhere, right? And if your current position can't give you what you want, you go somewhere else.
But so she also caused Amir to lose his job. Granted, she had a replacement, but
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Michael in some ways. It was all for the best.
Yeah,
she had the best intentions, but she lied to her husband. Went behind her husband, even to get her husband to something he'd be better at, and whatever. She lied to her husband. By going through what's his boss' names? Ruth. I still forget.
Oh, Reut, the friend, yeah.
Reut, the boss, that's the accountant.
Yeah.
Okay. By conspiring with her against his back, and then so I didn't feel like it was so bad. You look for another job. You find an offer here. You kind of negotiate one offer against another offer. That's just kind of what you do. But lying to her husband, saying, "Oh, what too bad you're fired, but now we have this. Now you can learn kollel and get a stipend."
Right.
That I felt was
and interestingly,
great family dynamics.
Interestingly, it so came from the wife, right? Which again goes back to this kind of stereotypical religious life kind of atmosphere where the woman, and this is in the show, I'm not saying this is truth and Torah Misinai, but that the woman, the wife, wants her husband to be a Torah scholar and not a secretary. Right. And wants to make sure that her husband is studying Torah and that that's his role in the world and all of those things. And so when he doesn't do that, she tries to find a way that he can go back into that role, even though it's so clear that she's doing that for her own maybe image, but also because that's what she thinks he should like and should enjoy doing. And yet for him, he seems to be very fulfilled in the job that he's doing, even though it has nothing to do with learning Torah. And I can hear Rabbi Pernick in my head saying, nobody really wants to learn Torah and he should learn Torah and all these things. But it doesn't seem from the show that that's really his main goal. Rabbi Barbara and then Jeff and Linda.
I sort of found the whole business thing uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because I used to be a banker. And if I had a client that did business that way, even though it was for a good charitable thing,
yeah,
it's like taking a bribe. It's extorting money for a purpose that has little or nothing to do with your business.
Yeah, that is definitely what it seems is happening for sure.
Yeah. And then the fact that the kollel money gets used to support Amir also I find troubling. Well, I just find the whole thing that she manipulated that.
Yes.
A problem. And I also think, boy, I'm just on this tonight. I also think that she was not really upfront with Nitzan. I mean, she sort of said, oh, then I'm going to have to look. But I think in Nitzan's mind, she was going to think about it some more and they were going to come back together again and talk about it. Because that's how things work. I think that's how things work in business.
Yeah.
You talk about something and you come back to it. And, she was just ready to jump ship. And I think it would have been more legitimate for her to say, you know what? It's in Yerushalayim. I don't want to be driving so much now that I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
I just think she could have made it better. But I was bothered by all the business stuff. And I know it's different in Israel than it is here.
It's definitely different. We could have, I didn't even think about this, Rabbi Goldstein. We could have done a whole thing on Jewish business ethics because there is, and Rabbi Barbara, you know this for sure, but there's a whole, canon of Jewish business ethics and how you're supposed to treat another person in business, Jewish or not Jewish, how you're supposed to be in business as a Jew yourself. And when you're supposed to pay someone and how you're supposed to be truthful about certain things. And I didn't even think about that as a theme, but this class could have definitely surrounded that. And you're right. I think it was manipulative. I do wonder manipulative in the kollel piece. I do wonder though, and I have not been in enough jobs, nor have any of them been jobs where I've done what Yifat did, to know really that this is how it works. But I do imagine that when you are offered something and it's not settled yet, if you do leave your other job, that there probably are things that you can't say until everything is settled. So that's at least how I felt it was going down with Yifat. I felt like she was just trying to give as much as she could without knowing that everything was like, as they would say in Israel, sagur, like it's completely taken care of, the signature on the dotted line.
And I also have to say, it's been a long time. It's been over 30 years since I was in business.
Yeah.
But I just think that, I don't know. I just think there was a way that maybe Yifat could have been a little more open and left the door open a little more. I feel like it's just like one day she just decided that's it. I'm going to they offer me more money and I'm going to get more money.
Sure.
See, another thing she could have done was gone to Nitzan and said to her, look, I'm not trying to pressure you, but these are the situations, and laid out, it's in Yerushalayim, it's more money, my husband doesn't work. My husband's being a secretary and getting coffee for people.
Right.
Okay, so I'm done.
No. Thank you for sharing those things. I will call on Jeff, but thank you for sharing those things.
Well, we don't know that Yifat did not sign a non-disclosure agreement with her new boss. We don't know that. And as far as extortion goes, my mother used to put money in the blue box, and a guy used to come to the house every once in a while and collect the money, and he didn't beat us up, so that was kind of a form of extortion too. No, but what I really wanted to say seriously is when Yifat went to Rui to get Amir out of that job, she didn't really know what was going to happen. I mean, she didn't know there was going to be a scholarship set up. So it was kind of like taking a chance, with Amir not having a job at all.
Right.
I guess that's it made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And interesting that she was okay with him not having a job at all, as opposed to having that job, right? That job made her, to use your words, made her so uncomfortable that she was willing to get a raise and change her job, as opposed to letting him stay in this job and still be bringing home the bacon, so to speak, though probably not actually bacon.
Croissants. And also, I agree with Barbara that just like taking advantage of that, like American. Of course, they had to put in the American with like the heavy accent.
Yeah. This was the second American with a heavy accent. Also,
really?
The first one was in the first season, I think. Anyway.
Oh right, I think the first episode wasn't
the woman wearing tefillin.
Yeah. And yeah, I also agree. This seemed like very, very dishonest. I don't know if extortion is the right word. I don't know. But he wasn't able to get his permit. So she's like, okay, donate to this kollel. My friend can now can be a student at the kollel and get a scholarship. And my other friend can be happy their husband's not giving me a secretary anymore, even though he really likes it and she likes him in the job. Yeah, for sure that seemed very, very dishonest. And all these red alarms went off in my head. It's like, how could she possibly do that? Who's this Rabbi Katz guy? Is he going to be able to kind of like, grease the wheels a little bit? Maybe sometimes that's how it works in Israel, but it seemed like a bribe. And that is absolutely asur. If it was a bribe, halachically, that's completely asur. Granted, I saw it was a TV show. We have to move the plot along, fine. But that really, really brought up a lot of red flags in my mind. Okay, well, where'd Rabbi Schatz go?
Yeah, I'm here. My internet just glitched for a second, so I didn't hear everything you said, but I'm sure it was very, very good. Robert.
I just wanted to mention a quick story relating to Hodaya's issue about, not everything bad is being secular is not all bad. There are a lot of positive things. So in New Orleans a few years ago, we have a little celebration called Mardi Gras, and with about 10 days of parades. And actually, Mardi Gras, unlike 30, 40 years ago, it went way out of the French Quarter, and it's very family-oriented. So even most rabbis, the Jewish community in New Orleans go at least to the family-oriented parades. And it doesn't get risque until you head down into the French Quarter. So I went to this lecture sponsored by one of the Chabads in town. I won't mention which one. And it was comparing Mardi Gras with Purim, which happened around the same time. And so it starts off with Mardi Gras is really awful. It's so sinful and it's horrible. But Purim, a machaya, and it was totally demonizing the very important cultural festival in New Orleans, or you could say Catholic festival that, and not looking at anything positive in it for little kids, for adults, and so it's the same kind of thing. Mardi Gras isn't that evil, and so the secular world isn't that bad, and I think Hodaya trying to tell her students that, or answer back the speaker was very thoughtful.
Yeah. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, fascinating. So I think I was going to mention this before. It seems like in our conversations we're having, it's almost like a dichotomy, the secular world and religious, Judaism, religious. And I'm going to push back a little bit what Robert said, but I still want to frame it. Then you'll see what I mean. Partially agree and partially disagree. So talking about broad strokes, in the Orthodox world, there's generally two different broad paths of how to deal with the secular world, secular culture. One is, I guess, the Haredi approach is build big walls, speak different languages, different names, of course, Jason is whatever, different names, different clothes, and have nothing to do with the secular world. And you have to work, but you work in order to make money. And it's an approach, because people see and there is, quite frankly, a lot of immorality in secular world out there. And if you see it, we don't want to have anything to do with it at all, and just preserve ourselves like in our kind of holy neighborhood, our holy community. And the other way, which is actually a smaller section of Orthodox Jews, is talking about America, is more modern Orthodox. And in theory and practice, it might be a little different, but in theory, there's this concept called Torah Umada. right? Torah and secular studies, we'll call it, Torah and science. And so in theory, what it is, okay, we have Torah, Judaism, spirituality, and everything good about secular society. And in this Torah Umadah, it means secular studies, whether it's literature, music, mathematics, computers, philosophy. But it's also like on a very intellectual level, right? It's not like watching TV or going to the movies, unless the TV is like, a great documentary, or maybe like Srugim that has like, we can have like a conversation and have like important issues about it. So I would say that there is a pasuk in the Torah in Sefer Bereshit. Does everyone remember that in Parshat Chayei Sarah, Sarah dies, and Abraham goes to the Ma'arat Mechpelah, the cave where he'll eventually bury Sarah. And before he buys it, does anyone remember what he says to the locals there? What line he says? He says, Ger vatoshav anochi imechem. I'm a sojourner and a resident among you. Sojourner on one side and a resident on another side. And Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, we call the Rav in modern Orthodox circles, just the rabbi, he has this take. He says, to be a Jew is to be both. You're a ger, you're a stranger. Jews are separate from society. Jews are separate from society. We have our Torah. We have, from the Orthodox perspective, we have our halakhas, we have our laws, we have our fences against the outside world. And then we're a toshav. On the other hand, we're also a resident among you. We're a resident amongst you. And therefore, being a resident, we also can take the best of secular society. And I would say the best of secular society is philosophy, music, good movies, good documentaries, anything that will enrich our lives, spiritually enrich our lives, intellectually enrich our lives, and then leave everything else. So my philosophy, and it's sometimes harder to do it than it is to talk about in theory, but to take everything great about the secular society that we live in and jettison all the rest. So I'm in New Orleans. I'm doing a little bit of sightseeing. So I got here last Wednesday, and I'm here till last Monday. So on Monday afternoon, I went to the French Quarter. So Robert knows much more the French Quarter is than I suppose I do. And I went to this great place, Café du Monde, where they have this type of donut called beignets. Wonderful. Rabbi Josh certifies them. Very nice.
You know that most of the people on here live in New Orleans, right?
Oh, really? I don't. Okay, the only person I know
Rabbi Pernick's community comes and my community. So there's a lot of New Orleans on here.
Okay. So everyone knows what beignets are. But then, so I was walking through the French Quarter, and I had to, because I'm a tourist, and how can I not? I went to Bourbon Street. Granted, it was 6:37 at night, so it was before it got dark, and also in the summer, it wasn't so busy. I was told what to expect. Some people, I think even Sue Ray told me you can skip it because it's just really seedy. And I had to see it because I just wanted to see it. But like blocks and blocks of loud, seedy bars, and I'll just say it, strip clubs, every so often. I was looking in the bars. Everything was empty pretty much because it was too early. But it's not a place I'd want to be at the dark.
Also, it's COVID.
And it's also because of COVID.
Yeah.
It's not a place that I would really want to be with after dark. And, I felt even a little uncomfortable just walking down the street. I saw it as I was doing it from observing it from a sociological perspective. I wasn't going to get a drink there.
You were doing a study.
What?
You were doing a study. You were doing research.
Study, fine. I was seeing it as an outsider as the ger part, the sojourner part, and not the resident part. And so I would say that Bourbon Street festivities is not something a Jew should be taking, any Jew really should be taking part in. Mardi Gras itself, I don't know. There's family parts of Mardi Gras. I can't speak about what Mardi Gras is, but traditional Mardi Gras, at least it's stereotypical, what I think of Mardi Gras, that's not the type of thing that I think that Jews should be a part of. There's Torah, there's secular society, the good things about secular society to enrich our Torah and enrich our religious lives and kind of bring out new meanings in the Torah, and, getting drunk and giving out beads and, just like Gashmius, I feel like that's a secular society, from my perspective, that, that we can live, they can leave. So I see like a ger to a shav, but there's like a line from my perspective.
But I think that I get it. And I think that there is something to be said for that not meaning that you're not Jewish, right? Like Rabbi Pernick went to Mardi Gras last year, right? And it doesn't make him any less of a Jew. So I think that there are certain ways in which I love the idea of the ger and the toshav and how we need to like understand our place in both of those kind of sociological arenas of our lives. And I think that especially given the secular and if we're going to just take the extremes, the secular and the religious worlds that are being discussed in this episode, one of the things that I would hope that both worlds would know is that the secular Jews are not Jews, right? They're just Jews choosing to be Jewish in not a ritual halachic manner. Whereas the Haredi Jews are no more Jewish than the secular Jews. They're just practicing more and might look more from a stereotypical perspective, but they're not any more Jewish. And so I think that having those experiences out in the world, I think, depending on appropriateness, could we say this is something not to be involved in or this is something to be involved in? Sure. But in the scheme of things, when you look at the outside world versus Mea Sharim or versus, my gosh, why can't I think of Super From in Israel?
B'nai Brak.
B'nai Brak, thank you. Gosh, it was like on the tip of my tongue. That there is an element of those fences really becoming walls, right? That instead of just having boundaries, now you've really just decided this is my world completely. And I think there's problems with that too, because you need to know, that girls exist if you're going to marry one, for example, which is a thing that, in the most religious of societies, you don't even talk to a person of the opposite gender until you're about to marry them. So that kind of experience, I think, does more harm than good. And that's where I would, that's where I would push up against you a little bit.
Thank you, Rabbi Schatz. I just want to clarify. Thank you, Rabbi Schatz, for that clarification. Maybe I misspoke or didn't communicate as clearly as I would like. I didn't mean to imply that, someone who goes to Mardi Gras or like whatever is who.
No, you didn't say that. I was just making it clear. Yeah.
Of course, you're Jewish. If you're Jewish, you're Jewish. But I was saying, I thought like it's not like if Jews should be holding themselves to certain values. Yeah, it's not the place that like a Jew should be going to. But it doesn't mean if you go, you're not Jewish. That's not what I was saying.
But see, Mardi Gras, in a strict sense, is a Catholic thing to celebrate. What do you call it? Everything the opposite of being, of their savior.
Right, it's like Halloween, right? It's the same kind of idea.
It's the day before Ash Wednesday, and the thing is, parades. The French Quarter is the French Quarter, but the rest of Mardi Gras in the last 35 years is actually very. It's great for kids. They get gifts. It's very celebratory, and it's become very secular. And so, from a Jewish participant or someone interested, it's really to celebrate what makes New Orleans unique.
Yeah, it's culture.
Right? Yeah, and it's music. And that's why Josh Perner could go to it and be with his friends, or and not worry about seeing stuff he shouldn't see, because that's on Bourbon Street. But in Metairie, in the suburbs where the parades are going on, everything's fine. And so, but if you stereotype the secular world as being very evil, totally, and sinful, then it's really you stop trying to understand the rest of the world that you're maybe not part of.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, if I was here for Mardi Gras, I mean, I'm sure I would do it as a New Orleans experience. But I wouldn't go to Bourbon Street, because from what the wild experiences. But parades, okay, parade, a celebration. I would be here.
And culture is also, to go back to our conversation last week, culture is also very different than ritual observance, right? Going into, even though Rabbi Pernick and probably Rabbi Goldstein would disagree with me, but going into a church just to see architecture is very different than going into a church for mass, right? That's a very different experience. Even if neither are supposed to be what you're doing, it's still very different experiences. And so same with, it's how we talk about Halloween, if that's happening in your community, right? That if you're not celebrating the holiday, you're participating in the social, cultural aspects of things. Rabbi Barbara asked, did we talk about Nati bugging, what's her name? I can't remember her name now, about the mole that she has on her neck. No, we didn't talk about that.
Tehillah, isn't it?
Tehillah?
Rabbi Tehillah.
Sure. I'm really bad with names, so I can picture her, but I don't remember. So no, we didn't talk about it. What do you want to talk about, Barbara? Obviously the way he went about it was like a little pushy. He's a doctor. My family's made of doctors. So that kind of thing was like, oh yeah, okay, well that's like what they do. But I guess the way in which he had the doctor come to the show, that was like a little bit much. Though it was nice to see Nati care about someone other than himself for once. Like that was such a lovely thing that he was really worried about her. And that's not usually his MO. So,
but the way that he worries about her, is he sends her awful pictures, which is a very scary thing to get.
Yeah, that's true.
And it really has to do with his bedside manner, which is totally lacking, except for Mrs. Schwartzman.
Right. I think it was probably like a WebMD type article, that tells you like if you see this kind of, which isn't, no one should Google anything if you have anything. I do it every time, but you shouldn't do it. But yeah, I think, I'm sure that's exactly what it was in terms of, him trying to get her to just see what the issues might be. But yeah, you're right. It's invasive and it's pushy.
But then when she tells him that she's decided to go, instead of just being, oh, great, then he spills the beans about the friend coming and looking at her. And that to me was what was really invasive.
I don't think he said anything about the friend coming. He just said you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you're right. He could have just gone with it. That just seems to be that, I think he's just a little bit socially confused. But
Rabbi Schatz, I don't know how to raise my hand because I'm on my phone.
That's okay.
But I just wanted to comment on, in general, I felt like the episode was, and I felt this in previous episodes too, that there was just a lot of unethical, or not really unethical, but immoral kind of behavior on the parts of many of the people who are supposedly from people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a TV show. I think that there needs to be, aspects of the show that become dramatic. And I think that they're trying to convey them as humans also. So, trying to get things to happen the way that they would want them to happen. I don't know that I can say that I feel like this episode was any more immoral than other episodes that have kind of had those elements of conniving behavior. But it does seem to be that characters are growing into their skin through some of these different elements of kind of getting around the boundaries that maybe they should be holding.
Yeah.
And yet they're all caring for one another. That was one thing I noticed about this episode, right? That even though it's not done in the best of ways, like Yifat is really trying to care for her husband and for her family. She doesn't do it in the right way, but she's caring for him. Nati is really, for the first time ever, trying to care for this woman who he's been seeing. which again, he doesn't do it in the right way, but at least he's trying to care for her. And even Rayut knows that she doesn't really need to fire Amir. So she finds him the next thing that he can do. So she's not just firing him. So she's taking care of her friend. So I think that they are, and also Hodaya, actually, like as a teacher, I would never in front of my students reveal that kind of personal information ever, because those are boundaries you don't cross. But I think what she knew in that moment was, if I share this, I'm giving them a window into life that they don't actually know anything about. And so I'm doing them a service. So there too, she cares about the life that they would be living, even if she's doing it kind of in the wrong way.
And she was upset about the person that came, the Dati lady that came that was speaking about secularism or whatever.
Right, exactly.
She was upset about her providing only a jaded perspective.
Totally. Right. And that all secular people must just be off the deep end. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I agree that their intention, that they weren't malicious. They were all well intended.
Yeah.
But still, I felt like, if it wasn't a frum Jew, if it was a secular Jew, then it wouldn't be necessarily considered as unethical but because they were frum, that they needed to not do it in the way that they did it.
I would also just add, just like Rabbi Schatz said, that it's TV, we just have to get the story moving forward. And the writers probably aren't Dati themselves. And although altogether, I think it was a groundbreaking series, for sure, a groundbreaking series in Israel. I think the first time ever in Israeli television to show religious people or observant people not as caricatures, and actually as characters you can sympathize with, and as real people. Having said that, it's also TV. So I agree that so many things are done in this episode that were unethical, whether it was Nati, whether it was, things with the job, or taking advantage of that rich American from Boston. There's so many things that didn't seem to be ethical on the surface. I wasn't reading into it so much that, they're religious, they shouldn't be doing that. No, they shouldn't be, but it's TV. But I also like to add that I don't think it should make a difference if they're religious or not. If they're doing something wrong, it's religious. I'm going to stop using the term religious, and I'm going to use the term observant, because it's not the same thing. Shouldn't make a difference if they're observant or not. If they're doing something that's ethically wrong, whether you're secular or observant, it's ethically wrong. And I can see that it's more kind of shocking, more in your face when someone's observant and does something that's wrong. But if someone who's not observant does something that's wrong, just makes it as equally wrong.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? This is more of a meta topic than we've had in the past. Yeah, Jeff.
I was just thinking, in regards to what's going on today in America, the school, the girls not being told that there are two sides to the story in terms of the secular world.
Yeah.
It seemed to me that a lot of that's going on vis-a-vis American history, for example. Mm-hmm. And the idea that I'd have a daughter, say, in a school like that, and she wasn't, even at that age, maybe find out there are two sides to a story, and they should be able to get the facts and make up their own minds and not have just propaganda. That's, to me, upsetting too, whether it's a religious thing or a historical or whatever it is.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's part of what Hodaya was getting at, right? She wanted to make sure, not just for her own image, but for the fact that they know that you can be a really good person and very connected to your Judaism and still believe in the country that you live in and be secular, right? And knowing, as you're saying, kind of both sides of that story, or at least just about something that's not who you are, allows you to form your own opinions. And I think that where it becomes tricky, specifically in the religious world, though I will say, even growing up in an extremely conservative Jewish home, the amount of students who I knew after day school who went to Israel and became super frum, it felt the same way to those parents as someone in the let's call it Haredi, though that's not really what we're talking about here, but like the very Orthodox world becoming secular. It felt the same way because it's that shift. It's just a shift that all of a sudden disrupts that which you know. And therefore it's not like, oh, we grew up Reform, so we're really proud of our son who's modern Orthodox because he went up in status, right? No, that does not happen. I mean, it happens, but you're not looking to go up rungs of a ladder. So I think that hearing both sides of those stories is really important. And what people don't often think about is it's not necessarily going to mean that a person changes to be like the speaker, right? If the speaker had told honest stories about being secular that were positive as opposed to just negative, all those girls in that school would not have automatically become secular, right? Even if it sounded good, they just would have known honest stories. So that balance, I think you're completely correct. That balance is very important. And I think that's where Hodaya's class ended up coming from. Michael, and then Denise, and then we'll wrap.
Oh, I was just going to say, when you made the comment about somebody going from Reform to modern Orthodox, Rabbi Josh isn't here right now, but he would quickly have reminded you that was his story. And I think his folks are very proud of him. So,
yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. And that's why I use the example, that I think that you can be very, very proud, and you can be very accepting of that journey, but it's not, you don't teach your kids to grow up in a Reform household hoping that they're going to somehow go up. And you don't teach a kid in a Haredi world that they're going to somehow go down, right? There's no really real up and down, but on the gradient scale of observance, right, is what I mean, that there's no level of, you don't believe that you are growing up in a world so that you can become more observant, right? That's not how I grew up in my Jewish identity. I was never told that I needed to be more than I already was. If you become more observant or less observant, that's your choice. And harei ze meshubach, you should be if you want to be, right? But there's no reason not to share that second side of the story, because there's no bad results, right? You hope that you will be accepted, and you hope that you are just finding your Jewish identity, which the Pernicks are obviously, very glad that Josh did, which is wonderful. Denise.
So I feel like there's a tendency within human beings, maybe in general, but very much within education, to want to present these very stark black and white, up and down, right? It just oversimplifies, and I feel like kind of trains people to be idiots on a certain level, because life is complex. That's just the way it is. And I think educators I went to a modern Orthodox day school, and I came from a all over the place home. And across the board, they are uncomfortable with complexity.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real problem. I think that for all the talk we hear about in education about teaching kids this and that, I feel like educators themselves need to get comfortable with, life is complicated. There's a lot of duality. There's a lot of triality and quadrality, and they're not okay with it.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think it's across all different subjects too. It's not just them. Back to Jeff's point, right? We see it in history all the time, just teaching the history that's going to make the students in the classroom comfortable as opposed to the whole story. And that is definitely a problem. And I'll pass it over to Rabbi Goldstein in just one second. One of the things that I did when I was in rabbinical school was I was part of something called the I Center. And the I Center it stands for the Israel Center, not like the I Center. And you get a certificate in Israel education, and you do a project. And one of the projects that I did was around the idea of not using generalities, right? Not saying it's the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, because it's not every Palestinian, it's not every Israeli, right? There's much more nuance to that. And really knowing what is behind that nuance, that's what allows our students, and really everybody, to learn a full story. and not just pick the sides that are easiest for us to hear or easiest for us to swallow, but to know what's happening. And obviously developmentally, it's not going to happen in kindergarten, but it could happen in third, fourth, fifth, and upwards, for students to be able to know what those differences are and those full stories are. Rabbi Goldstein, you can have the last word.
I would just add that as someone actually, not just as someone who's going to be teaching middle school and Orthodox school, I would say that I value very much value critical thinking, and middle school at their level, I want them to take facts and really kind of judge them and think and analyze as much as possible. Certainly we're talking about high school, whether it's Gemara, history, or literature. Sorry, all of Gemara, like it's not all of traditional rabbinic literature is about taking facts and analyzing it and thinking about it critically. I would also say that like if it's a school or whether it's home, if you have certain values that you would want them to pass them on to your children, certain values that if you think that they're the correct values, are the values you want to live by, they're the values you think they're Torah values, they're values you want to pass on to your children. So I would say that there's a difference from brainwashing and then giving people like kind of all different options. A loving parent, and after saying going through an Orthodox education and Orthodox upbringing, for whatever reason, someone goes on their own journey and becomes Haredi, or becomes secular, or becomes Reform, or becomes whatever, a loving family and loving parent will hopefully accept them and still love them no matter what. Family is family, and realize that they took their own journey. I don't know, but I would say within a school and a family context, trying to educate someone in your values, I don't know, I think that's actually very, very positive. Doesn't mean keeping from them other information, but emphasizing one's values. And that's how I will, go forth in my teaching and, in my rabbinate as well.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.